Napoleon Bonaparte. The name itself just conjures up these huge images, right? Cannons, conquest, a massive empire stretching across Europe. But what if I told you his greatest, most enduring campaign wasn't fought on any of those battlefields? What if it was fought from a desk on a tiny, remote island, with the prize being history itself? Let's dive into Napoleon's two battlefields. So we're going to start with one of the biggest head-scratchers in all of history. In 1803, Napoleon is at the absolute peak of his power. And what does he do? He gives away a gigantic piece of his empire. The big question is, why? $15 million. That was the price tag for a chunk of land that would literally double the size of the brand new United States. I mean, it sounds like an absolutely insane bargain, right? But as we're about to find out, a guy like Napoleon, he never did anything without a very, very good reason. And this event, of course, was the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. It's a deal that completely redrew the map of North America. And more importantly for our story, it gives us this incredible window into how Napoleon's strategic mind really worked.
Just so we can all wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this, we are talking about over 800,000 square miles. This was a deal that basically defined the entire future of America, and at the same time, it signaled this major shift in Napoleon's own plans for his empire.
So let's be super clear. This was not a blunder. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a cold, hard calculation. It was a strategic pivot, moving away from one dream to finance another, much bigger one. Let's break down exactly why he did it.
It really just boils down to three key things. First, and this is the big one, he needed cash, and a lot of it, for his wars in Europe. Second, his grand plans for the Americas had completely, utterly fallen apart. And third, he wanted to make sure the territory didn't fall into the hands of his number one enemy, Great Britain. Look, empires run on money, and Napoleon's war machine was incredibly expensive. The Napoleonic Wars were draining France's treasury dry. So that $15 million, that wasn't just some nice bonus. It was a critical, life-saving cash injection to fund his real ambition, total dominance of Europe.
Now what's really fascinating, and what a lot of people miss, is the connection to Haiti. Napoleon's whole vision for an American empire, it all hinged on this one incredibly wealthy sugar colony, Saint-Domingue. But the Haitian Revolution, a successful slave revolt, completely shattered that plan. Without Saint-Domingue, Louisiana basically lost its main purpose. It was supposed to be the breadbasket, the support base. Now it was just land.
And this just brilliantly shows you how pragmatic Napoleon was. He knew the British Royal Navy owned the seas. There was just no way he could defend Louisiana from them. So the choice was actually pretty simple. Sell it to the neutral Americans and get some much-needed cash, or just sit back and watch the British take it by force for absolutely nothing. Yeah, not a tough call.
So, Napoleon the Conqueror sells one empire to build a bigger one. But his story? Oh, it doesn't end at Waterloo. Not even close. In fact, his final, and you could argue his most important campaign, was just getting started.
After his final, crushing defeat, Napoleon gets exiled to this remote rock in the middle of nowhere called St. Helena. His military career's over. It's done. But that same strategic mind that sold an empire to fund a war, it just launched a new one. A battle for his own legacy, fought with nothing but ink and paper.
I mean, the moment he finds out his fate, his mind immediately turns to controlling the narrative. He absolutely knew that if he didn't write his own story, his enemies would. This wasn't some quiet retirement project. This was his last strategic objective.
But this is where things get really complicated, and honestly where a huge misunderstanding of history comes from. See, there are two very different sets of writings from St. Helena, and most people only know about the one that, frankly, is less important to Napoleon's mission.
Okay, this slide breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you've got the real memoirs. These were dictated by Napoleon himself, corrected by him, and they were meant to be his official history for all of us, for future generations. But then, on the other side, you have the memorials. These were basically the diaries and notes of his companions, filled with daily chats, little stories, anecdotes, and those became wildly popular. But they almost completely buried the work that Napoleon himself saw as his true final testament.
And make no mistake, producing these official memoirs was a serious operation. Napoleon basically set up what you could only call a literary factory in his little house, applying full military discipline to the job of writing history.
He put together an entire team. He was the director. His generals were now his scribes and researchers. He even had his staff, like his valet Marchand and Mamluk Ali, working as writing machines, just endlessly copying and correcting draft after draft. This was a full-on production.
And he was a relentless editor. This quote from one of his copyists, it just reveals how obsessed he was with getting it perfect. He wasn't just telling stories, he was crafting a masterpiece. And he was even comparing his own process to the great philosopher Rousseau. He was polishing his legacy down to the very last comma.
So in the end, every single word was deliberate. The memoirs were his final dispatch from the front lines of history. He was speaking directly to us, right now, to future historians, making absolutely sure that his version of the Italian campaign, of Egypt, of his entire epic story, would be the one that stood for all time.
This quote really just sums the whole thing up, doesn't it? On the battlefield and on the page, Napoleon was always in command. He wasn't just a character in history, he was its author, its director, and its star. And he was determined to direct the final act all by himself.
And that leads us with this one final, really fascinating question. Napoleon's physical empire, it crumbled, it's gone. But the legend, the story he wrote for himself on that little island of St. Helena, that has survived for over 200 years. So you have to wonder, what's more powerful in the end? The empire you build with armies, or the story you build with words?